As I mentioned earlier from the beginning of this Mass, this weekend we celebrate the solemnity of Christ, the King of the universe. And believe it or not, we are in the last week of the church year. And in the US, this time of the year is filled with holidays and celebrations. Thanksgiving is on this Thursday. Christmas will be a month from Monday, and then New Year celebration. And when I was a seminarian back in the day, long time ago, maybe like 100 years ago, this time of the year was my favorite time. It is not just because of the joyous spirit of the season, but mainly because I did not have to go to school much. And as a student of St. Michael's Seminary, I often took full advantage of this winter break because we have a long winter break. And since I do not have any family in the US, I go on to travel. I go on to do pilgrimage a lot. And I remember one of the trips was to Mexico in the year 2019, when I visited many cathedrals and the three most popular shrines of this country, namely the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City, the Shrine of Baby Jesus in Zacatecas, and the Shrine of Cristo Rey in León. And all these destinations, all these places were so impressive and left lasting and uplifting memories in me. Yet, on this great feast of Christ the King, I would like to share a little more about the Shrine of Cristo Rey in León, the story behind it, and my reflection on this great feast. So on that day, I got to the Shrine of Cristo Rey, which is a little more than 15 miles southeast of León, a city in central Mexico, at around 5 p.m., around sunset, and it was gorgeous. The present Cristo Rey statue is 75 feet tall, and it is the biggest bronze statue in the world, and stands atop the highest mountain in the region. And believe it or not, it took me and my friend almost like 25 minutes to go from the bottom of the hill, of the mountain, to the top of the hill by car. So the road just like circle around the mountain. And inside, there's an altar sits on a circular platform with 3 steps. A symbolic royal crown was suspended in a large mantle dome, and natural light filters through carved slots in the marble walls. The outside of the dome serves as the base of the statue, and its arms are open with statues of 2 angels kneeling at either side, one holding the crown of thorns and the other a royal crown. And this present Cristo Rey statue were erected in the year 1950 as a dedication of Mexico to Christ the King and as a tribute to the models of Cristo Rey. Have any one of you heard about that word, Cristo Rey in Mexico? No. So I think we have to do a little better with our history class, right? But I will tell you a little bit about this Cristo Rey. So in the 1920s in Mexico, an anti-Christ and anti-Catholic church regime gained control over the country and tried to suppress the Catholic church. They banned all public religious celebration. And to resist this regime, many Catholics took up the cry, "Viva Cristo Rey," "Viva Cristo Rey," which means "Long live Christ the King." And they called themselves Cristoros. And the Mexican government responded with even greater suppression and repression and killing of many priests and ladies. The most famous Cristoros was a very young Jesuit priest named Father Miguel Pro. And during this time of persecution, Father Miguel uses using his wisdom and humor to disguise as a businessman, as a taxi driver, as a beggar, or even as a policeman, to provide sacraments, to provide Mass for the suffering Catholic of Mexico City. However, unfortunately, the government found him and arrested him and sentenced him to public execution on November 23rd, 1927, 97 years from yesterday. And the president of Mexico at that time thought that if he invited the press to the execution, Father Miguel would reject his faith, would beg for his mercy, and could incite the fear among other Christians and Catholics. Yet, Father Miguel did not plead for his life, but instead, he knelt down, holding a crucifix, and prayed. And when he finished his prayer, he stood up, he kissed his crucifix, forgave his executioners, and then, holding the crucifix in his right hand and a rosary in his left, he extended his arm like this in imitation of Christ's crucifixion and shouted aloud, "Viva Cristo Rey!" And immediately the firing squad fired. He died. However, his martyrdom ignited even greater devotion and courage among other Christians and other Catholics to stand up for their faith. And eventually, the Mexican government had to stop the persecution, and peace accords were reached between the Catholics and the state in June 1929, 2 years after his martyrdom. So that's a great story about Christos and Father Miguel, and inspired me a lot. But as for me, after that trip to Mexico, this feast of Christ the King always brings me back to the shrine of Cristo Rey in Leon, and serves as a great reminder for me to learn from Father Miguel and other faithful Catholics to fight for the spread of the reign of Christ despite formidable hostilities. And I strongly believe that this feast also a great reminder for all of you, for all Catholics, that amidst all the trials of our life, our faith in Christ can and will sustain us in the most difficult moments of our life. Yes, my dear sisters and brothers, our faith in Christ, the King, will sustain us in the most difficult moments, difficult times of our lives. And to those who allow Christ the King to reign in them and through them, our good King will speak the words we long to hear. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. So, my dear sisters and brothers, on this last feast, this last week of the church years, we should also reflect on what in the end really matters. What in the end really matters. It has our status in any political parties. It has the esteem of our superiors or friends. It has how many houses we accumulate. It has how many money we have in our bank accounts. It has how many toys we have in the playroom. No, I don't think so. All of these are not our final end. They are just the means for us to reach to our final end. So what matters in the end is whether we have allowed Christ the King to reign in our heart, to reign in our minds, and to reign in our wills. In the gospel, we just heard that Pilate asking Christ are you a king? And notice that Jesus does not answer Pilate's question directly. Jesus does not say yes or no. Have you ever wondered why Jesus never answered that question directly? I think because Jesus wants you and me to answer that question for ourselves. Is Jesus our king? And notice also that Pilate never considered Jesus as a king. There's many reasons for that. Maybe he afraid of losing his political position. Maybe he afraid of the unrest among people. But I think the main reason that kept Pilate from recognizing Christ as king was his pride. Yes, pride kept Pilate from recognizing Jesus as a king. And I think pride keeps us from Christ as king as well. Because pride does not acknowledge a king outside of oneself. And pride often says something like this: I need to be the one in charge. I need to lord over others. I determine what truth is for myself. But my dear sister and brother, this sort of pride is a rebellion and rejection of God. The sort of rebellion and rejection that leads to broken relationships and families. But let me tell you this, pride can be shadow. And pride must be shadow. Indeed, we must shadow our pride so that we can belong to the kingdom of truth and life, the kingdom of holiness and grace, the kingdom of justice, love, and peace, the kingdom of Christ that we know we long to be part of. This coming weeks, my dear sisters and brothers, of November and December are filled with many demands of our time. So during all of the busyness of the month ahead, we must remember that our deepest duty is not to contribute to the growing godlessness of our culture, but to Christ the King and bring about his kingdom of faith, hope, and charity. That's why this is something I ought to challenge you all, that plan ahead for this Advent, which begins next Sunday. Plan additional prayer time. Plan additional spiritual reading. Plan additional act of kindness. Plan additional words of encouragement. And moreover, the changing of liturgical season is always a good time for us to do some self-examination, to examine whether selfishness, pleasure, lust, control, money, and pride reign in our lives, or Christian generosity, self-control, humility, prayer, and love. And it is a good time to make a good confession, my dear sisters and brothers. It is a good time to make a good confession of the time when we let sin reign in us rather than Christ. And here at St. Patrick's, during Advent, we will provide plenty of opportunity for you to go for your confession. And believe me, most of St. Patrick priests are very cool and friendly. So do not be afraid. Go for it. And when you and when we are willing to do those little things, we are allowing Christ to reign in us. We are allowing Christ to sit on the thrones of our hearts. And we are allowing Christ to transform us into his instruments of love, justice, and goodness. Then what will happen? Then we will be like Father Miguel and so many other faithful Catholics, become soldiers of Christ the King, or even become his partners in reuniting divided humanity and in extending his kingdom of mercy, truth, and love to all. Viva Cristo Rey.